All right, so on today's episode of Oh My Gosh, What Am I Doing to This Poor Car? I'm going to be talking about my roll cage that I built. So, as it may or may not be known, I want to take this car to Pikes Peak, and so I was originally going to build this just to the Pikes Peak specifications, which all they require is a basic 6-point roll cage. So you just need a main hoop, forward bars, window bar, 2 rear bars, and then you have to have 3 driver door bars and 2 passenger door bars. But as you can see, maybe from where you're sitting, this roll cage is a little more in depth than that. So I was doing some reading for kicks and giggles. I decided to Google building a Pikes Peak roll cage and see what came up. And I found some pictures from the well-known Evo Crash that now has a corner named after it, Evo Corner. I found some pictures from the wrecked car, and I used to think, like, yeah, it was the safety that kept those cars alive, or kept those drivers alive. It's because the roll cage did its job and all this. And, well, the roll cage did do its job. But from the pictures I've seen and reading forum posts from people that have built Pikes Peak cars, this car was missing some. It was built to the bare minimum of what Pikes Peak required. So it actually caved in on this side, on the passenger side, and there's a co-driver. And if you watch the clip and you pay close attention, you actually see this cave in, and the co-driver's seat broke off the mounts, and his head was outside of the roll cage, and it actually hit a rock and shattered his helmet. How he is alive is a miracle from God. And the roll cage was just crushed. So, seeing that, I decided I didn't want to build my roll cage to the bare minimum anymore. So I did some more reading, and what a lot of people were recommending were rally cross or stage rally rated roll cages. So that's where a lot of this extra support on the A-pillars comes in, and this with these sill bars, you might be able to see it down here. The sill bars, this door bar style, and also I don't have them in yet because it's going to be easier to put them in once I pull the body off, but I've got a V-style roof bars that are going to go in here, and then of course all the gussets that are going to go in once it's all welded out. But right now everything's just tacked together. So knowing that, I decided to go with a little more sturdy of a roll cage, because even though I don't plan on crashing, if I do end up taking a dive over Evo Corner, I don't want to leave it up to chance that I survive. So this is what I've got going on. And just to kind of go over some of the tools that I've used to build this, is I have used of course a welder and a bender, and then angle grinder, kind of the 3 standard tools. And you could build a roll cage with just those 3 tools and a tape measure. You really can. But there are some things that are a little nicer to have. One thing I wish I had done sooner, but I didn't do it until I was making these pillar bars. Is I took a length of 550 cord, and I tied a big washer to the end of it, and I was able to droop it over here so I could run it down to the bottom here and actually give me a rough idea of what my angle needed to be to get these in here. Because the main thing with these sill bars or these door bars is they have to, looking from the outside, they can't have a bend in them. They can't have a bend in them like this. They have to be straight. So I was able to do that pretty easily with that. And another tool that I like is this little Pipe Pro thing. It's just a piece of plastic with a bunch of needles in it, and you can move them around and stick them into a corner, and it gives you it doesn't give you exactly what you need to cope, but it gets you really close, and it's a good starting point if you just are looking at something and you have no idea what the heck to do there. I did do a lot of the just the grinder, just coping with just a grinder and just drawing like a face line and then going, what was it, like you draw a line off that's a little over a ½ inch, and then you can kind of, I'll link a video to how to do that in my description. Going on with some other tools is a 6-inch angle grinder, a 4.5-inch angle grinder, and actually I use an electric die grinder and a chop saw. So the 6-inch angle grinder I recommend using it because the 6-inch cutoff wheel is actually big enough to slice through the diameter of this tube, which is 1 3/4 inches, in one shot without having to like come back in it from the other side, and then you get like misaligned cuts and it's just weird. So that's why I recommend a 6-inch angle grinder, just for cutting off stuff, and I used it for cutting all my notches and all that, because some of these are pretty wonky and it's nice to have a bigger diameter disc. 4.5-inch angle grinder, it just has a flap disc that lived on it the whole time, and I just used it for polishing things up, cleaning them up, getting rid of burrs. If I had to just adjust a cope just a little bit, I was able to do it with the sander disc instead of having to cut more material off, which worked really well. And then the electric die grinder was amazing. I had my electric die grinder with little flat discs on it, and that was really good for opening up a cope, adding a good radius to it so it could mate into the other tube nicely, and I was able to get some really tight fits with it. So that was not a necessary tool, but a worthwhile tool to have. And then chop saw, I really didn't use a whole lot, but it was nice to have when I had to cut a length. I need to, cut a length and take it to go get bent, or cut a length to, fit in these rear diagonal bars here, or this diagonal bar. I still need to put a harness bar in, but I just have an Evo steel cold cut saw. The thing is amazing. But honestly, didn't use it a whole lot. Like I said, you could do everything with a welder, a bender, and a 6-inch angle grinder. Really, those are the only major, and a tape measure. But that tape measure is understood. So those are kind of the tools I used. Now, I guess I should kind of talk about the rules that I followed. So going back to that, I made sure everything fit the criteria for the Pikes Peak roll cage, which is a standard 6-point cage, 3 door bars on the driver's side, 2 door bars on the passenger side, and then 2 rear bars. So I've got all of that. Oh, and a window bar. I've got all of that. I'm going to have my 2 roof bars. I've got this diagonal bar, I've got this diagonal bar going in between my two rear bars, and I used a sill bar counting as one of my three bars on both sides, and then I did the double V or W style door bar just because I think it's going to be the easiest way to get in and out of the car, and they look nice. I like the way they look. So with that in mind, I drew inspiration from the NASA Rally Sport rulebook, which is where I was able to follow the rules. I was able to follow their rules to get all these extra bits that I used, because that's what a lot of people were recommending when building a cage for Pikes Peak, is build it to rally spec, because the crashes you have at Pikes Peak are more related to a rally crash than a stock car crash, which is actually the stock car roll cages is what Pikes Peak references in the rule books. Another thing is I wanted this car to be NASA compatible, because if I ever want to go wheel to wheel or race in some other competitive or another competition, and also Global Time Attack. So Global Time Attack and NASA at the time of this filming have the same rules for a cage. So I was able to follow those, and then of course they completely they totally cover the rules for Pikes Peak. And another thing is, if I had went with the lighter material options, right now I used 1 3/4 120 wall DOM steel tubing. If I had gone with the 4130 or the Chromoly 095 or the Dokal R8 083 wall, that's also an option for the weight class this car is going to be in, I wouldn't be able to compete in anything else. So luckily, it's kind of funny because it's by chance kind of that I ended up with this material, which ended up being perfect. So that's something to be thankful for. Another thing is the amount of material I've used. There's 100 feet of material in this roll cage right now, which is kind of crazy to think about, but there's 100 feet, and I started out with 6 sticks of the material, which is 120 feet. So I've got 1 stick left, which I'm going to use for odds and ends. I've got to run 2 front gussets out, stuff like that. So there's a lot of material in these cages, and 6 sticks I think is going to be perfect, because that gives me extra to do the extra things I need. Another thing I did is I've got 2 2-inch rocker boxes at the front. I'll admit those are only there because I made an error, and the body work had slipped off the tabs that I've welded on the bottom of the frame, and it was sitting 2 inches too low, which is also why there's such a big gap up here. This was a lot tighter fitting, but I took all my measurements on a body that was sitting 1.5 inches to 2 inches low, so that's what I get for rushing. But all's well that ends well, and it all fits in here pretty well. So next thing I gotta figure out is pulling the body off of the frame and then welding everything out. So everything's going pretty good. It's a little update, a little my thoughts on building a roll cage, and links to all of the resources I used to build this roll cage, all the links for them will be in the description below. So be sure to check that out. And it's really hard to sit here and not just, you know, pretend that I have a steering wheel and just make race car noises. I'm going over again. So, till next time, we will catch you guys later.